I'm excited to talk to you today about how to pick a tarot deck, partly because we start a new tarot series tonight. If you've been part of my 10 class series, you know that we not only develop great skills on how to work with tarot from the very beginning of picking a deck all the way through doing a more complicated 10 card reading. We also make friends. We spend 5 months to meet twice a month, developing relationships and trusting each other enough to ask the most personal questions. We give each other readings, we get lots of readings, and we have a great time. So, for those of you thinking about joining my class tonight for Learn the Tarot series, I want to talk to you about how to pick a deck. If you haven't picked a deck, don't worry. We'll talk about it tonight in class. But here's a quick heads up for all of you on what's great and what's not great in a tarot deck to learn from. So first of all, a tarot deck by definition has to have 14 cards in 4 suits. That's hearts, diamonds, clubs, spades, or cups, swords, wands, and pentacles. And then a 5th suit, unlike playing cards, it is 22 cards. They're the major arcana. All card decks that label themselves tarot cards usually have those 78 cards. Here's where those cards can be really great to learn from or really hard to learn from, and there's a huge difference in what that is. The first one is, do the cards have names on it? Now, I love working with the Carl Jung deck, but you can see this card has no name on it, so you don't know what it is. It does have an arch, which is only there on the major arcana, but I don't want to have to guess what a card is. Compare that to this card from the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which says Tower and has a number on it right up here. So it makes it easy when you're looking up the card meanings to know what card you have. I'm going to here throw in the Rider-Waite-Smith explanation. Rider is the publisher, Waite is the author, and it's most often called the Rider-Waite deck because you want to guess the gender of the artist who got left off getting credit. You got it. Ms. Pamela Coleman Smith does not get enough credit, so you'll notice that some people have begun in the modern times, it's about a 100-year-old deck, using things like the Coleman Waite deck or the Smith Waite deck or the Waite Smith deck. Much better. I call it Rider-Waite Smith, and I invite you to call it that too. Anyway, the artist, Ms. Smith, put the name and the number on each card. It makes it so much easier to work with. This is a more authentic, older card. It's called the Venetian Tarot, and it's beautiful. But with that gold leaf, I have trouble even telling what it is, let alone counting the number. Here's another example. This one's from the Jungian deck. I don't want to count those swords. This one not only tells me that there's 9 swords, but you can guess from how this card looks that this card means nightmares. This one, which is another older deck, does give you a number right over here, but it's still hard to count. So what I would suggest that you do is find a deck that the meaning of the card is visible on the card, so it's got symbols instead of just pips, and that it's obvious to you what number and suit it is. This is a really good example. It says 6, and these swords are clear enough that I have no doubt this is the 6 of swords. In this case, it's called the Egyptian deck. It's the 6 of cups, and it says it on the bottom, and that helps me not doubt what suit I'm working with. Now, talking about this Egyptian deck, some decks take a theme and they change all of the meanings for the more traditional Marseille deck or the Swiss deck or the Rider-Waite-Smith I showed you. The Egyptian deck does all of the suits in Egyptian themed. So this is not a big deal. And the back of it looks like this. I get a little bit of a struggle sometimes trying to figure out what their tower is. In other decks, the change in the atmosphere and the theme of the deck, like The Last Unicorn. I have a friend who uses that and loves The Last Unicorn deck, and she feels like all of the meanings of the cards are obvious to her because that's what the cards mean, and that's what the movie The Last Unicorn means. One of my favorite decks is the Inner Child cards. The Inner Child cards name their cards differently, so this one, which would normally be the Hanged Man, is really easy to identify as the Hanged Man because you can see the similarities between these two cards. But instead, it's called Jack and the Beanstalk because it makes everything a little bit easier. And you know in Jack and the Beanstalk how he maybe starts out a little too cocky and has to slow down. Well, there's some patience required in the Hanged Man card, as well as sacrificing to get what you really want. Um, so I would say if you've got a theme to the cards that you want to use, make sure they're clear. Like that card in the Hanged Man clearly looks like this Hanged Man. So if you're using a book and you want to look it up, you're not going to have trouble. You'll also see they have the same number, so you could look it up in a book that doesn't go with this. A Rider-Waite-Smith or a traditional book, it'll tell you, oh, that card's what number? And I can look it up. Let me give you another example. Mother Goose is a 3, and the Empress is the Mother card. Now, these look nothing alike, but everybody knows that Mother Goose is a good mom, and this card is about the good mom. So they have the same number. You could look it up in any book, and this one will help you figure out the meaning if you like fairy tales like that. So, one other thing to think about. You might choose eventually to have a deck that you use the major arcana from to learn, but don't read with it. That's how I feel about the Jungian Tarot. I love the symbology. I love exploring the major arcana. I just, like I said, don't like how they do the numbered cards. Here's another thing. What does the back of a card look like? For me, I don't like using reversed cards when I'm learning, and I encourage people not to. If your deck looks like this or like this, you don't know which is upright. If your deck looks like this, can't tell which is upright. But in this case, I can always be sure, this is the back of the Jungian deck, that I'm putting the card upright. And in the beginning, I think that's really important. Now, plain decks like this are fine. Decks that look like this, which is the Ellen Cannon Reed, that's great too. You might not like the symbol, so you might not choose this one. That's a plus when you want to not have reversed cards. It's a minus when you get more sophisticated and you want to use reversed cards. You might not want to know what a card is upright or down before you turn it over. For the most part, I encourage you to use decks that don't change the names of the major arcana. And here's one exception. In Ellen Cannon Reed's deck, instead of calling this card the world, which is a traditional meaning, she calls it the universe. But you can see these two women are looking an awful lot alike. And so I don't have any trouble because the number's there and the symbology is so similar to know that this is wrapping it all up, the biggest card of the major arcana, and what these cards mean similar is easy to figure out. That's just a couple ideas about picking a deck. If you ask me, learning with Rider-Waite-Smith is the easiest because it's the most universal. And most of those things that I talked about, numbered cards, labeled swords or wands, having major arcana have their names on it to make it easier to learn, that's all there in the Rider-Waite-Smith. And if you want to do something like the inner child cards because they appeal to you, or the last unicorn cards, go for it. Just be sure that you know what those translations are, because it's not so bad to go from Jack and the Beanstalk to the Hanged Man if the images on those two cards are this similar. So I have a lot of decks, dozens and dozens of decks, and I keep coming back to using the Rider-Waite-Smith because when I share it with other people, they have the most familiarity with it. And you'll develop a familiarity, and you might even find yourself using different decks as you go through for different things. I certainly have some decks, like the Thoth deck, that I will use when I'm doing deep personal work, but I don't use to reading other people. The Thoth deck was done by Crowley and Lady Harris, and what I love about that deck is that it is very evocative, and he has names on the bottom. Hey, bonus if they give you a word that helps you know what the card means. And I encourage people not to use the Thoth deck to learn because it's a pretty not traditional imagery. What happened is that Lady Harris was a contemporary of Picasso during his Cubist period, and so you'll see all of these pictures that look like the person walking down the stairs, and they may be distracting in their Cubist style. So lots of different decks, lots of different ways. Reach out to me and ask, and I'd love to talk to you more about that. And please join me tonight in Learn the Tarot. There's an Eventbrite link I'll put in to get a ticket. We've got 10 weeks of going from how to pick a deck and blowing away rumors. By the way, it does not have to be given to you buy your own deck, and Amazon is just fine. But of course, shopping local is always a great karmic thing to do to support the local economy. So buy your deck however you want, and know that if you've got questions, I'm here to help you whether or not you take the tarot class. Have a great day, and I hope I talk to you soon. Bye.